This is him casual and cool and trying to get the millennial vote.
Right?
Barf.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. Trudeau continued making his rounds over the last week and sat down with his buddy Terry DeMonte to chat over a few beers.
Yeah, I already don't like where this is going. Let's take a look.
I want to start with this because it's there's so much going on in the world. There's so many things that are happening. There's so much turmoil. The files on your desk must be piled this high. And every year I say this, and every year people miss it. This is not a Walter Cronkite interview. That's an old reference. Oh, geez.
Yeah, no.
This is an old guy reference. This is not a hard-hitting journalist interview. Justin and I...
Why is it the one that stresses out my team more than any other interview I do?
I don't know.
You know, I seem to remember Mr. Gerritsen talking about criticizing Pierre Poilievre for sitting down with friendly outlets in terms of his year-end interviews.
Mr. Poilievre has had an opportunity now with at least 3 different news organizations, friendly news organizations, I would add.
What the hell is this?
And I bet Trudeau's team is nervous about this interview because it's the one in which he's most likely to say something stupid. I mean, he's going to say something stupid in any interview, but like especially this one. Let's watch.
I'm curious about the details of what it's like to be prime minister, which you're getting really good at it. You've been doing it a long time now. And you told me last year you're just starting to really dig the gig. And I want people to understand that I'm not going to be talking about the issues of the day, but there are some things that I want to talk about, and I want to start with...
Well, I mean, just even before you start.
Okay.
Even last year saying that I'm starting to dig the gig. I have reveled and enjoyed this job from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It takes a little while to really figure out what is the right way to do it,
how the card rides,
position yourself, how the subtleties in it.
Yeah.
You know, think about your jobs that you've had. Think about when you started those jobs. Can you imagine telling your boss, you know, I know I'm not really performing at my best, but by year 7 in the job, I should really be settling in. And that's when I'm really going to start to perform. So if you could show some patience with me and just give me 7 years of grace period, that would be great.
But even worse is that Trudeau's popularity is down worse than it's ever been. And for some reason, he seems to think he's doing the best job he's ever done.
Right?
What?
And you get, the way things best work, and quite frankly, events keep coming and throwing us off. You have to relearn every time, but there is a sense that I feel I'm better at prime ministering. The actual, I mean, people can evaluate from the exterior whether that's true or not, but in terms of actually being able to do the right things the right way and figure out what the role is and fill the role. A little experience helps.
I can't listen to this pompous jackass go on. Like, oh my goodness, how long is this interview?
It's an hour.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't know if either of us will make it through it. And usually we're pretty good. Usually.
We might cut some stuff for you guys to spare you.
Oh, we're going to cut a lot of stuff.
We're already suffering.
We're going to cut a lot of stuff. Again, go to figure out the role. Again, 7 years, everybody. It was 7 years. Now you're in, at the end of year 8. Come on, man.
I guess one of the things I want to address is whenever I have a conversation about you with friends or people who are interested in politics, they talk about you like you're the emperor, like that that all the decisions come through you and everything that you feel and everything that you decide is what, comes down the pipe from the Prime Minister's office. I want to know how the files work.
You can tell that they do. If you looked at his face.
I was going to say, did you see him smirk?
Oh, yeah. He was like, yeah, I am.
He's so proud of being a jackass.
This is your prime minister, everybody.
This is him casual and cool and trying to get the millennial vote.
Right?
Barf.
I want people to know if there's a decision that the Minister in the Environment has to make, or there's a decision that Madame Jolie has to make. You're the boss. I've heard some of the staff call you the boss. The boss will be here in 10 minutes. But is it like, for people who are at home listening to this, is it like working where you have to go to the boss's office and bring the files and say, here's what I think we should do, and then you get to make the last decision?
No, obviously not.
No.
First of all, the amount of work that goes on is so massive that would bog everything down. And one of the things that I deliberately set out to do in 2015 was change the approach from Stephen Harper's approach, which was very much a rigid top-down approach that was. Sorry, they're talking a little loud out there.
Yeah, they are. It's very distracting. Yeah.
Guys, can you maybe not talk too loud during all the conversation?
The boss is telling people to be quiet. Thank you, because it was getting a little distracting. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
What a pompous ass. There's obviously a producer there whose job that is to tell people to quiet down, but he's got to go, oh, you guys are talking too loud in my interview.
Grandstanding. And remember, folks, this is Justin with his friend. This is Justin. This is probably as close as you're going to see to what he's actually like. So this is it. I love that he's trying to you can always tell when a liberal's talking, and no, it's not that they're always lying, but that is
often
common.
The case, yeah.
But whenever they're talking about something bad, they will always blame the Conservatives. So he's trying to say that when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister, there was no decision that went on in the government at any level without his approval. Pretty sure that didn't happen. And here's the question for Trudeau. If Stephen Harper's government was so inefficient, why was his government able to do a better job, provide better service than your government, in which you added 100,000 employees?
And the service is worse.
So what does that say? Just saying.
So there is a huge amount of complexity. What my role is, first and foremost, is to set the frame, right? Is to say these are articulate the shared values we have as a political party, as people who come together. I recruited amazing people to come together and form one of the strongest, most diverse cabinets we've ever had in this country. And they have the responsibility of doing the things that they have to do. But on the biggest things and on the really core things, like on the main thing right now, which is affordability, which is housing, which is the things that are really core to everything, along with a couple of big international files. Yes, I'm involved in huge amount of all the aspects of that. But the latest decision on fisheries or the minutia of an approval coming through the industry department or something, no, we have great ministers and great teams that are all about that.
So you never see a press conference and go, oh shit, why did they talk about that, or why did they take that position?
Oh, no, I do that quite regularly. Okay. I'm like, ooh, yeah, we're going to have to clean that up. Or say, okay, if the minister doesn't respond to this issue clearly enough, then I'm going to have to go out the next day and respond to it clearly enough. And
is he not contradicting himself right there?
Yep.
Just, I don't have a hand in everything. I have this great team that, they decide whatever. Oh, but, if they don't do it right, I got to get in there. Well, what's doing it right? Like, how anal are you about this kind of stuff?
Well, and the thing is if he's the one that's saying that he has to clean it up, if he's the cleanup guy,
God help us all.
Like, What does that say about the quality of his government if he's Mr. Cleanup?
Well, and that's just it. But if you look at his ministers, none of them are strong. Like, none of them should be in those portfolios that they're in. There's not one that I look at and go, yes, you absolutely deserve to be there because you're doing the best job with that file. Not a single one.
No. And, like, again, you look at the important ones. You look at Champagne. He has the slush fund scandal on his hands.
You look at Gilbeau. He's a criminal.
You have Freeland, who's basically a history major, who's the Minister of Finance.
Come on. None of these people deserve to be in these files. But if you look at Pierre's shadow cabinet on the inverse, you see, okay, Melissa, she's really strong in...
Public relations.
Public relations, thanks, that's the word I wanted. You look at his finance minister who built a business from the ground up.
And you have Andrew Scheer, and you have Michael Cooper, you have Michael Barrett. Like, you very strong people in their own right and in their appropriate disciplines that match their skill set. Right? That'd be like taking Larry Brock and putting him as Minister of the Environment. And you could say, well, you know, Gibault is he was a climate activist, so he should be the Minister of the Environment. He shouldn't even be an MP.
No, because he got arrested.
Yeah.
It would be better if I am just repeating what the minister already said the day before, and that sort of settles it.
Right.
Rather than me having to go in and clean up. I mean, one of the things that we did, or that I decided, was that every Wednesday I would take all questions in question period.
Right.
And for a while, the ministers were like, woohoo, it's a day we get to sit back and the Prime Minister has to take all the questions that would be directed at me. And then one of my colleagues, because I didn't want to do it, pointed out to them, you shouldn't want the Prime Minister getting up on your files. If you have a headache that he's getting questions about and he's having to answer on it, then it's because you put something on his plate that he shouldn't have to deal with. So,
well, it doesn't really matter because whether it's Trudeau talking or the minister, they both answer the same, which is not even answering the question.
Right.
So,
but this is odd. It's like your boss saying to you, okay, don't worry about it. On Wednesdays, I'll take care of X. And then you're being like, oh, okay, good. I get a reprieve on Wednesdays. And then him scolding you for giving you a reprieve.
Yep.
What is this?
It's Justin Trudeau.
You once told me your father always insisted that you have dinner together, and that that the dinner conversations could vary between Shakespeare and the Constitution. And I was wondering if you've continued that tradition.
I think we've probably updated the frame, but I had dinner with Ella and one of her friends just last night, and. The conversation was around, what were we talking about? I was explaining to her, I was trying to have her understand why everyone should know the value of the speed of light, just as part of your general knowledge, knowing that it's 300,000 kilometers a second, that it takes 8 minutes for the light to go from the sun to the earth, is just part of the frame of understanding the world. She's like, Dad, you're just confusing me. None of that really matters. And I goes, well, no, but you should know what the value of C is, because it's a useful number. And it was.
You have the Prime Minister with a drama degree explaining to his daughter and his daughter's friend why they must know the value of the speed of light to survive in day-to-day society.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yep. And I think it is a clear exposition of how Justin Trudeau manages his priorities on a day-to-day basis in this government. He focuses on things that don't matter. He focuses priority on things that he thinks matters, but they actually don't matter.
But they don't matter to the average person. They don't matter to the average Canadian.
Right.
Me knowing the speed of light is not going to pay my mortgage or buy my groceries.
So this is what I meant when I said earlier, folks, that you're going to actually get to see the real Justin here. And that, unbeknownst to him, he didn't even think that this is the glimpse that he was going to be giving everybody.
Oh no, he thought he was being clever.
Oh yeah, he so thought he was being clever and like, oh, Justin, you're so forward thinking, having people, understand what the value of C is. Sorry, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Are the kids on social media?
God, yeah.
They are, right?
Yeah. One of the best things that happened was when I chose to we made a decision as a government that we would ban TikTok from government phones.
Yeah.
Well, my kids have government phones because they're part of the family, and therefore they don't have TikTok on them. And that was.
Are they mad at you for that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Isn't that nice?
We pay for the Prime Minister's children's phones with our taxes.
Isn't that nice?
Awesome.
There's no reason that they should have government phones. None. No reason at all. But, because they're part of the family.
Gotta waste that taxpayer money somehow.
Yeah, however we possibly can.
Wow.
Do you see it? Are you ever on social media? Because I see it. My wife and I see it. And I'll say to Jess, Jesus Christ, look at this. Look at this ugliness. Do you see it? And how do you cope with that?
first of all, yeah, I see it. I mean, you can't
not.
even though I don't spend much time at all on social media,
right.
I very much know it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there.
You're a little busy.
No, but every now and then, we'll see it. But inevitably, my reflection is not, ooh, that's about me or that's this. It's about them. It's like my question is always, well, what is going on in this person's life that they are that angry, that they are that lost, that they are needing to, lash out to this level? And how can I help them, but how can I help create a society in which they are not going to be that angry? How can we contribute to reassuring people about that their institutions are going to be there, that yes, the world is changing massively, but it's changing in ways that if we position it right, will be good for Canadians.
So, again, he displays how out of touch he is, and how willfully ignorant he is. He knows darn well why people are angry. Like, oh, well, why is this person angry?
Maybe because you're taxing us so hard that we have to decide between, rent and food, or rent and heating the place. Like these are the decisions that are facing Canadians every single day.
Right. So, the fact that you're sitting there saying, oh, well, I need to figure out, how do I create a society? We don't need you to create a society, Trudeau. We have a society. And you're screwing it up.
Right. We need you to step down and let Pierre Poilievre take charge and fix this mess that you've created over the last 8 years.
100%, because the buck stops with you, as you've said before. And you need to take accountability for once in your life. Once. We know you're not going to do it, but you really should. Your whole party wants you to. But you refuse to. He's so disgustingly out of touch. Yep. And this is one of the reasons everyone is so pissed off.
Good for Canada. And that's really the focus. As I see people so filled with anguish and fear and concern about what the world's going, and it comes out a lot in lashing out against me or against the World Economic Forum or against whatever the global governance or whatever that is their boogeyman of the day is, but I tend to be a lot of it. It's what can we do to solve for some of those challenges, some of that anger, some of that fear? How can people see that even though the world is changing, there is room for, and there's an opportunity for them to succeed and their kids to succeed and their community to succeed? How do we reassure people that there is success and happiness and a recognition of their value in the future while they're being buffeted by forces designed to make them more anxious, to gin them up with misinformation, disinformation, and quite frankly, political movements out there, particularly the MAGA conservative movement, that is designed to amplify people's fears and not provide any real solutions to them. I mean, the complexity of the world right now, where climate change has an economic impact and a security impact, and social programs have an economic impact and a climate impact, and everything is woven in, the simplification and the dumbing down of politics to emotional knee-jerk reactions is good to mobilize and get people outraged, but it's not good to actually be able to build the kind of consensus and solutions that people need.
Before we continue, I just want to say that JT is sitting way too far away from his microphone, and that's why you can't hear him and it cuts out. It's not the sound on our end, it's him sitting back like a moron and not speaking directly into his mic.
Yeah, you'd think he'd done enough interviews that he should know this, but apparently, you know, the producer of this interview doesn't want to tell him, Mr. Prime Minister, can you please pull the mic closer to you, or could you please lean into the microphone? Right? So, anyway, I love the patronizing that is coming out of Trudeau's mouth, because he's sitting there saying, well, you don't need to get people riled up. That's not a way to do this. You've done it all on your own. Here's the thing that he always complains about. He says that Pierre's the one going around and making everybody angry. That's been his narrative. And Pierre has responded to that by saying, you think I needed to tell them that their rent doubled? You think it took me coming to a rally of 2,000 people to tell them that food is like 50% more expensive now than it was 2 years ago? You think it took me talking to that small business owner who had to close up shop because you're forcing them to pay back CERB and you forced them to close their doors over COVID? You think that's me? If Trudeau actually does think this, then he thinks that every single Canadian is really dumb and that they need someone to come and tell them how to feel. But Trudeau is a bit smarter than that. And this is just his way of trying to reassure his supporters that, oh, no, this is just Pierre. Everybody else is stupid.
Yeah, Canadians aren't feeling this and thinking this on their own. It's Pierre getting them riled up. It's these YouTubers getting them riled up.
It's MAGA conservative politics that Pierre keeps bringing up here, despite the fact that we were the only, people to actually bring up, Hillary Clinton into our convention, even though the Conservatives didn't do any of that, didn't reference American politics at all, and we did that. But it's them that's bringing it all up here.
How do you explain to people? I've tried to use the hockey analogy when I have a conversation about politics. I often talk about, two teams that meet each other for 7 games in the playoffs. And one of the things that I think is very Canadian is after it's all done, the guys who are battered and bruised and bleeding meet at center ice and shake hands and pat each other on the back. And I try to make people understand you don't hate anybody. Your opponent, the head of the Conservative Party, in the House of Commons, you go at each other. But I try to tell people that's politics. That's the way politics work. Is there a way to tamp that down and make people understand that you don't hate anybody?
First of all,
you disagree with them.
I don't, but I mean, two things. First of all, there are always moments in the House around a particular challenge, a particular disaster, a particular moment, where you feel these moments where we all represent a diverse group of Canadians. We all care for this country enough to make sacrifices to be here, whether we're on government side or opposition side, and you get those moments of that. But the other thing that I reflect on is it's not just that it's not consistent with who I am and who most of those people are who choose to serve their communities to hate an opponent. And it's that it's really counterproductive. Like, to my mind, the Liberals made a huge mistake in the years following 2006, the 2006 loss to Stephen Harper, in that, so many Liberals didn't like him so viscerally that it clouded their judgment in a whole bunch of different ways. And most Canadians who, Mr. Harper was not a particularly warm and fuzzy style guy.
No.
But most Canadians were like, okay, he seems competent enough. I disagree with him on a few things, but he's not a bad person. The Liberals are busy going, he's a bad person. It's
Right.
like, when you get into that emotional register, you actually lose your ability to have reasonable conversations on it. But the challenge is when you, and so much of that emotional register is so impactful in politics these days.
Yeah.
So much is done on emotions. I mean, Liberals, as reasonable centrists in general, a little left on sometimes, tiny bit right on other things, are sitting more or less where Canadians are. And most Canadians are thoughtful and reasonable about their life and have their own opinions on a whole different range of things. And, we can usually go and reach them in a thoughtful way. So we don't have to gin up big negative emotions. And it doesn't really work because we tend to be a little more on the earnest side. Yes, these are problems we can solve. Let's roll up our sleeves and pull together and try and do it.
Yeah.
And it's a harder sell at a time of real anxiety that people are going through to say, yeah, you know what, we're gonna work this in a serious way and we're gonna put forward real solutions. And when there are people on the either end of the spectrum saying, oh my God, from the left and far left, the system is broken, capitalism is killing everyone. It's, that rich, nobody should be successful in this country. All those, far left tropes that creep in when you can reach that way, or conversely on the far right, where it's like, any government is bad government. We're trying to inject people with microchips. Where like all the different things that come. Like there's a way of emotionalizing things in a really intense way that is powerful, that does lead to negative emotions like hate and anger.
Yeah.
And I just don't think Canada does very well as a country when we're driven. Actually, we don't end up being driven very often by hate and anger. I mean, it's not us.
I can't believe he just sat there and said, well, like the far left, they're saying, get rid of capitalism. Trudeau, are you not aware that your finance minister has literally said that we need to get rid of capitalism?
Does capitalist democracy still work?
This guy he's got such a disconnect between what he thinks a liberal should be or what he thinks he is doing and what they are actually doing. It's the Liberals who are instilling hate in this country. They're the ones that are dividing Canadians. Parents versus LGBTQ+. That's a recent one. Vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Men versus women. Like, just anything. This guy is trying to drive a wedge between all of us. And we don't need Pierre Poilievre to tell us that this is going on. We can see it.
People were angry before Pierre came along. Why people gravitate to Pierre is because everybody feels that he gets it.
Well, and he's speaking the truth. He's not telling us one thing and then doing another.
Well, and that's the thing. The facts that he puts in front of Canadians, they can look it up. And we have. You've seen us. Just about every video that we talk about Pierre, when he raises a fact, we say, this is where you can find it. Whether it's the Parliamentary Budget Office, whether it's on StatsCan, or whether it's another online source. And, he's trying to say, well, Liberals, we're the ones who roll up our sleeves, get in there and solve the problem. Are you kidding? What you guys do is say, how can we throw money at that problem and make it go away?
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. All you guys know how to do is throw money at it. And you know what? Money does not solve all your problems.
Money doesn't solve any problem without a proper solution behind it. You spend money on solutions. You don't use money as the solution. That's a recipe for disaster, which we've seen baked in the governmental oven over the last 8 years. And that meal is sitting in front of everybody. And it is a travesty that this guy is sitting there making these decisions. And he's trying to say, well, you know, sometimes we lean on the left and sometimes we lean on the right. Show me one issue you've leaned on the right.
No, you guys have gone so far left that you think anybody in the center is far right.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, when Pierre talks about, you know, let hunters and indigenous people have their weapons back, you call that far right extremism. That's what you call it. You're ridiculous in what you're saying. You don't even have the same alignment as your finance minister, who stood up at a commencement ceremony and said, we need to get rid of capitalism. By your own admission, that's a far left talking point. And your government is out there stating it. So you yourself, sir, have admitted that. And your finance minister is out talking about it. I haven't heard you correct that.
That's what disappoints me so much. You know, when I use the hockey analogy, I always thought that was very Canadian. You scrap and, you know, you kick the crap out of each other and then you shake hands, you go for a beer. That always was a very Canadian thing to me. People ask me all the time how we became friends. And, you know, people always say to me, I know he's your friend, but, you know, it always opens with that. And I say, we became friends because I used to say, when I thought you were full of shit, I would tell you, right? When we disagreed on something, we would have a real sort of, you know, and
I'd set you straight.
And you'd set me straight. So I want to know, do you have people around you today that tell you when they think that you're full of shit or they disagree?
My God.
You do. So there's spirited conversations in caucus.
But that's the only way I can function.
The only way you can function.
You've got, what was it, almost 400,000 Canadians who are saying, you've destroyed this country, get out of office and step aside, and you're not listening.
You've had your own party tell you to resign.
Yeah, we know people on the inside who have said that.
And we've read in news reports of named liberals that have said he doesn't listen to anybody that's a backbencher, which is the vast majority of the government. So what are you talking about?
Again, he says one thing in front of the cameras, and he does something completely different when no one else is around.
And it's like he thinks that he can say this and nobody will know the difference.
You know, for me, having people who are comfortable disagreeing with me, and telling me where they disagree and forcing me to explain when they disagree, and justify and show that I'm actually engaged with them and thoughtful about it. Listen, it's the way I function. I need to surround myself with brilliant people who disagree and, you know, who challenge each other and challenge me, and we figure out what the right thing is. That's the way it is. No, I am delighted. Like it's well, you know me a little bit. When someone comes at me and goes, "Oh, I got a big thing. I got a big disagreement with you," I'm like, "Okay, clear out. I'm talking to this person for the next half hour."
Well,
right?
we've seen it on television with, you know, really nasty folks that approach you.
Yeah, we've seen it on television. We've seen it when you fired the first Indigenous minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, for disagreeing with you. Disagreed with you on 10 or 20 occasions when she refused to drop the case against SNC-Lavalin. We see what happens when people disagree with you.
Yeah, and these people on TV that Terry's talking about, those are obvious plants.
Oh, 100%.
Like, do you remember that young man who was saying, oh, you know, I don't agree with abortion and I'm going to vote PPC? Everybody says he's a plant.
Yeah.
Trudeau was just too articulate and there wasn't enough for it not to be pre-rehearsed.
Well, and it was convenient that that was recorded. That exact moment that was recorded.
You know, this whole thing is just one huge stunt. Like this interview right now, I know they do this every year and blah, blah, blah. But I would not doubt if Max Valiquette did not sit them down together and be like, okay, this is what you're going to talk about. And you're going to lean back from the mic and seem relaxed and have a beer and blah, blah, blah. You're going to seem really cool. Like this whole thing is just garbage.
In any argument,
Yeah.
what is most interesting, and the way our political system, was always set up. Look, there is nobody in Parliament right now who doesn't want a better country, right? So we could all agree with that.
Right.
I mean, the Bloc want their own country, but they want it to be better anyway, right? So then you take a step back. Okay, well, what does a better country mean? Well, it means safe communities with good jobs and, people optimistic about the future and, beautiful environment and opportunities and all those sorts of things. On that level, we can still, all of us pretty much agree.
Yeah.
The interesting stuff is, okay, how do we get there? What is the best mix of policies? What is the best priorities? What are the things you need to do first? There's a huge range of really important, interesting conversations about that. And that's what politics used to be all about, right? Where someone, more on the left would say, no, we need to take more from the rich and flatten out the income levels for everyone so everyone can basically just get by. And people more on the right would say, no. Those who are successful, we should be leaving them with lots of resources so they can be even more successful and drag everyone along with us. And then if you're in the middle, you say, well, we need to be there for the vulnerable, but we also need successful to be driving the economy, and they figure, and along that spectrum, there's a lot of different good arguments to have.
Did you hear what he said? He said, if you're on the left, we need to take from the rich and spread it out and equalize everybody else so they can just get by.
That's very telling. I didn't catch that the first time around, but that was his exact verbiage. So that they could just get by. This guy's saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, he is. It's on full display, folks. You don't even need any narrative. He's just laying it right out right there.
But there is something that is changing right now, and Donald Trump was a symptom of that, not a cause of that. There is a level of anger and sort of burn down the institutions and almost nihilism that's creeping in all of our countries, right?
Yeah.
In around the edges, where things that people thought were pretty much well established are suddenly going backwards. And take what happened with Roe versus Wade in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, we know for a long time that the American right has had problems with women's rights, but it was never supposed to happen in the United States. You were never supposed to see Roe versus Wade overturned and states and political parties rolling back women's rights that have been fought for generations. And people say, well, at least that'll never happen in Canada. We can no longer say that. There are things that we used to believe that we are now seeing instrumentalized and eroded in very, very real ways.
Why are those winds blowing up here, do you think?
So interviewer just accepts this as fact.
Again, they're alluding to the fact that the Conservatives want to take away a woman's right to choose, which, if you speak to Pierre, if you speak to most of the Conservatives, they're going to tell you, no, we don't care. And you know what? It would be a bad move politically. We've discussed this in the past, that only about 3% of Canadians want an outright ban on abortions. So to come in as a political party and ban abortions in any way, shape, or form, you're going to piss off 97% of the populace.
Yeah, not exactly a smart political move. And, it's funny. Earlier in the interview, he was saying that, there's all this MAGA stuff and misinformation and disinformation. Right there, you are flailing about, passing out misinformation. It is just complete bull crap. Look up Bill C-311. That's what this is. It's an act to amend the criminal code that basically says if a woman is pregnant and she is injured or worse in a crime, that be taken into account during sentencing. That's what that says. Has nothing to do with a woman's right to choose. But this is what he's saying. He's like, well, people, would never believe this, but people are starting to saying that. Yeah, the only people starting to say that is you and your cabinet, because you're trying to figure out something to throw at Pierre and make it stick, and you can't.
Where they're chasing these ghosts that aren't even there. And want to talk about stuff that I never thought would happen in this country. I never thought that, people my age would not be able to buy a home and start a family, or that people would be, having to choose again between eating or renting, or eating and paying the mortgage. I would have never imagined, and I see this all the time on Facebook, that families who both parents are already working 2 full-time jobs are asking on the Facebook group, does anybody know of a job that I can do after hours when my husband's at home, when the kids are asleep, so that we can earn extra money for the family? Like, 2 jobs is no longer enough for most Canadian families. What is going on here?
Yeah, I never thought I'd see tent cities. I'd never thought I would see the day when parents are actually moving in with their children.
I never thought I'd see the day where I was scared to take my little boy to the public park because I was worried about what drug paraphernalia he may step on or may come across that may be harmful to him.
And we probably thought we'd never see the day when it was legal to buy cocaine. Just saying. But this is you, Trudeau. But it's all the right that's the problem.
I think if more people traveled across the country, there'd be a better understanding of how big the country is and how diverse it is and how difficult it must be to manage. I mean, I can't even imagine.
I mean, yes, it is challenging and it's big and diverse, but Canadians are good.
Yeah.
No. Let's see.
They disappoint me these last couple of days. Their last couple of years, I should say.
Yes, there is a polarization around politics. And politics is getting more polarized, and it's using social media in very scary ways. And to be honest, the Conservative Party of Canada is instrumentalizing some very scary tendencies that they're importing from the United States.
Wow.
Hear that? Conservative Party is instrumentalizing some very scary tendencies that they're importing from the United States. You think they're referring to channels like ours?
Yeah, maybe. You know what the Conservative Party isn't doing? Calling all Liberal supporters racists.
Racist?
You know what they're not doing? Calling all Liberal supporters misogynists.
Misogynistic.
You know what they're not calling Liberal supporters? The fringe minority.
Small fringe minority.
But, it's everyone else's fault for the polarization. Not yours. It's the Conservatives' fault. Everything is the Conservatives' fault. Just once, I'd love to hear this guy say, "Well, I play a part in that. I played a part in that. That's partially my fault, my responsibility." You'll never hear that.
Narcissists never admit when they're wrong.
You'll never ever hear it.
Canadians, even Canadians who can fall victim to that, when you spend a little time talking with them, and I've had these conversations as well, where people have said like, "Oh, you're not at all what I expected." I think, yeah, I've had that a few times in my life, but even on some, what's one of the biggest things that polarized people in the past years? Vaccines, right?
Yeah.
Hugely polarizing for Canadians, right? Wrong. 80-90% of us got vaccinated, listened to science, kept each other safe, looked out for each other, and got through the pandemic both better on a health level and on an economic level than just about any of our peer countries. So you can't say Canadians were polarized around the pandemic, because 90% versus 10% is not polarized. Now, the political discourse, particularly within the Conservative Party of Canada, well, that was very polarized, but Canadians weren't. And when you look down the line at how the strong majority of Canadians feel, whether it's about worrying about climate change or wanting to make sure that women's rights are protected and supported, or wanting to see reconciliation with Indigenous people, like the values, Canadians are reasonably open and positive and thoughtful about it.
You know what I really hate here? I really hate that he's using the left-wing tactic of shaming to try to say that, well, if you don't agree with vaccines, if you don't agree with any of this stuff, then you're not a Canadian.
Right. And what's worse is that he's discounting how many of those people were coerced into getting a vaccine.
Well, and here's the other thing. A lot of people that agreed with the Freedom Convoy were vaccinated.
Well, and if you look at the numbers, I think before they started threatening people, it was around 70% of Canadians that willingly got vaccinated on their own, which it's still a high number. It's still a good number. But to get that additional 20, that's when you had to start, threatening
Firing people
with their jobs or telling them you're not allowed to go on a plane or a boat or a train or anything. The real number is that 70%. Everybody else was coerced, and you can't brag and say, oh, look, 90% of people got vaccinated and good job. And that was great. No, 70% is the real number. The other 20% were forced. I'm sorry.
And the other thing that he's not saying, he's not calling people misogynist, he's not calling them racist, but he's calling them the other percentage. You're still dividing people. You terrible, terrible leader. You're basically saying most Canadians, and he's trying to say most Canadians are essentially liberal.
Most Canadians are good people, but that 10%, gotta watch out for them.
Yeah, if you agree with the Conservatives, you're not one of those good people. That's basically what he's saying.
Guess what, buddy? 40% of Canadians agree with the Conservatives.
Yeah, that's a lot. A lot. It's not the fringe minority. Have you taken a look at the polls recently?
What troubles me, and you know this because we had this conversation, when the Prime Minister of the country goes out for dinner and you want to protest, absolutely. I 1,000% support that. Go on the street, make your placards, yell at him, scream at him, and try and make him understand what your point of view is. Mm-hmm. Bursting into the restaurant and harassing, and I know you shrug it off, but to me, that's a degradation of not just the politics, but I wonder why people think that that's okay.
I'll tell you why they do. This wasn't people that are they're typically liberal supporters that burst into that restaurant. We all know what this was about. And they did that because there's no repercussions for them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, look at the Freedom Convoy, who I'm pretty sure they were not bursting into restaurants.
Right?
But they had the Emergencies Act called on them, and some of them are facing trial right now.
Right? What did the Freedom Convoy violate? Some bylaws. These people that actually burst into that restaurant, that's actually a felony.
Well, it's trespassing for sure.
Yeah, it's a crime. It's not a bylaw, it's a crime. It's mischief. It's destruction of property, trespassing. There's a whole slew of charges that could be filed against those people. If you're going to prosecute one, you have to prosecute everybody. That's called the rule of law.
But that is a handful of people who've been instrumentalized by a particular issue, who are feeling very, very, wrought up about it, and make him. He did something that I think most Canadians would sort of say, yeah, no, that's not really our thing. That's not really the way. I mean, yes, freedom of expression.
Yes, absolutely.
Knock yourself out with that. Absolutely, go for it. But I mean, I spent, like, it didn't so much bother me as
I know.
I went table to table apologizing to the folks who've been there for a nice restaurant and said, I'm going to remove myself from the situation so you guys can get back to your dinner. Really sorry that this happened, right?
Yeah, I saw it on TV and I was afraid. So I texted you and you're like, yeah, TD, it's no big deal.
Well, yeah, no, but where it does start to, the thing that I find is when the protests cross a line, not that they're, attacking the office or even the individual holding the office or making things awkward for me or that, whatever, that sort of goes with it. It's that they decide that the people who came out for an event to hear, to engage in the democratic process don't get to. Like, I was here in Surrey a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, for a fundraiser, and people showed up and prevented folks from attending that fundraiser. These are folks who wanted to come to a rally with me, wanted to show their support, wanted to engage with me, all those sorts of things, and they were prevented from being able to fulfill what they felt was a democratic act of openness, of engagement, of choosing a political party by others who were trying to shout them down. And you see the same thing on social media when people who are women or minorities or whatever get so attacked viciously and vilely on social media that they remove themselves.
Okay, I will say, and I hate to say it, but I do agree with the man in that if you're going to protest, don't ruin it for everybody else. Like when we went to see Pierre Poilievre in St. Catharines, there were protesters outside. They were protesting. I think they were anti-abortion protesters. Anyway, they kept it outside. They didn't come into the hall. They weren't shutting down the rally. They stayed outside and they were visible, so you could see them. You could clearly see what they were on about. Fine. But it's usually the left that's trying to shut down events. Like, look at when Jordan Peterson went to speak in Ottawa this past February.
Like,
people were trying to shut it down. People did not want anybody going to listen to the man.
Yeah, there was petitions, like even
I think it was the mayor of Ottawa was trying to shut it down, if I'm not mistaken.
And thank goodness it was at a private venue. Like, it was at a privately owned, not city-owned venue. Otherwise, it probably would have been shut down. And
it's the left that is constantly doing that. He's not the only one that's happened to. You hear it happening to Ben Shapiro and Milo
Charlie
Yiannopoulos.
Kirk and Candace Owens. Like,
just all of them. And they're all right-leaning speakers.
And you don't have to agree with them. Like, here's the thing. If Trudeau came to our town and wanted to speak, I would do nothing to prevent it. I wouldn't be happy to see him, but I wouldn't prevent it. Why? Because I believe in freedom of speech. And that's the thing.
So I love it how he's saying, it's, or he's maybe not saying it, but he is definitely implying it, that it's the right trying to shut down these things and whatnot. But really, it's almost exclusively the left.
He not only said that, if you caught what he said about social media, he also was saying that, if you go on social media, women and visible minorities, they just get so viciously attacked. Okay, so it's angry white men on social media.
Oh, of course it is. And I say it often because of some of the comments we see around here, that you have to grow a very thick skin very quickly if you're going to be on the internet and in any public capacity.
And anyone who's been on the internet since the 80s will tell you that. That's what anonymity will do. So if you can't have a thick skin, if you can't understand that there's going to be some offensive things on the internet, then you shouldn't go on the internet, should you? But if you can't take that, then don't go out into the real world. Because the real world is not friendly. And I love that you think it's angry white men that is the cause of all the issues on social media? Tamara Lich just came back on social media. You should see the vile stuff that people are throwing at her. And what did she post? Just a picture of herself playing guitar. You should see the stuff. And it's not angry white men doing it.
It's angry white women.
Just saying. It's a bunch of angry white women. But why are you bringing race into here at all?
Yeah, anybody can be an asshole online.
Yeah, and how do you know the demographic of these people? You don't. But you're just making this blanket statement that angry white men, conservatives, are viciously attacking all of these people online. But, you know, this is the guy that's saying that Pierre is the one that's dividing Canadians. It's unreal. Unreal, the hypocrisy in the same interview.
From the public square. They say, well, I can't talk. I can't be there anymore.
Yeah, free to
and
express
people
their opinion.
have diminished the capacity of others to engage in the right of expression, of conversation, of freedom of conscience, because they have overpowered it with their drive, right? And that's the thing that worries me the most, because democracy only works when people are actually listening to each other.
Yes.
There is no perfect consensus that everyone's going to agree to. There's only levels of compromise that we all make to live in a pluralistic, free society, that we all have to understand everyone's different realities to a certain extent, so we can understand, okay, I think this is the path forward that's going to work for the largest number of people and not be unfair to as many people as possible. But that only happens when we're actually hearing each other's points of view. And that shutting down of those conversations is what worries me the most, because what you have is a small fraction of the population amplifying its concerns or its outrage in a way that drives others out of the political space, out of the public sphere.
I completely agree with you, Justin Trudeau. There's a very small, very loud group that is bullying people, shouting them down, shaming them, that has influenced policy, that has taken over the school system, that has influenced government enough that it actually has legislation to arrest people, to take children out of the homes of parents that disagree with the ideology that this very loud group is espousing. To the point where, for the first time in Western history, you can actually be hauled in front of the Human Rights Tribunal, fined, potentially go to jail, for not saying something that someone requires you to. Yet this guy is trying to say that this is on the right. This is the double talk, double speak 1984 George Orwell textbook example right here. It's just, it blows my mind. And everyone needs to see this. I think we're going to make a couple shorts here because everyone needs to understand what he's been saying.
And that's the thing that worries me. And that is one of the things that we're importing from the United States. And quite frankly, the Conservative Party of Canada has chosen to weaponize. And in my conversations with people like Brian Mulroney or Joe Clark or even Jean Charest or others who are definitely not on the same place on the spectrum as I am, but Conservatives used to be about protecting and upholding the institutions, right? And now there's a level of nihilism that's creeping in that is really challenging. And one of the ways I see it is I've dealt with both Democrat and Republican governments in the United States, and one of the secrets, or one of the things that you learn as a Canadian politician is, for all the fact that we are more, as a liberal party, more aligned with Democrats in some of the values, some of the protectionism that Democrats, focusing on workers and focusing on the well-being of Americans, sometimes makes it more challenging when we're so reliant on free trade with the United States.
Right.
Whereas the classic Republicans were all about free trade and all about, engaging constructively. Sometimes it was easier to work with them. And indeed, when it came to protecting NAFTA, I spent a lot of time working with some of the classic Republicans, either governors or leaders of business councils and stuff in the States, to put pressure on the Republican president to not tear up NAFTA because it would be bad for the economy in the United States. So, working across the aisle, whether it's with Doug Ford or David Eby here or anything, that's what we're supposed to do. And it actually makes the solutions better. It's when people decide that they just want to bust shit up and say it's all broken, so let's just burn it down and let's get power for power's sake and not power to solve problems, that I worry about the state of politics.
Mr. Mulroney had a lot of nice things to say about you helping save the NAFTA deal, which was a big part of his time in office.
I took some very, very smart advice from him.
So it's the conservatives who are riling everybody up and telling everybody how bad things are and trying to seize power for power's sake and not actually going to implement any solutions. I don't even know what to say anymore. I'm just tired of sitting here listening to these two guys circle jerk each other and just spout lies to Canadians.
Yeah, and pretending everything's great. Like, yeah, conservatives are going to come in and rip apart a lot of the stuff that you've done because it is so damaging to this country.
Canadians don't need Pierre Poilievre to tell us that this country is broken. Before you got here, JT, we were able to purchase a home, start a family, live on one income. We can't do that anymore. Like, if we were starting out now at the age we were 10 years ago, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Oh, we might be homeless.
Canadians are living at home longer because they cannot afford to move out. Canadians are having smaller families because they cannot afford to have families. How sad is it that having a baby has now become a luxury item?
Yeah, if I was buying a house now, no way. No possible way I would be able to do that. And, yeah, everything's broken, Justin. Look at this country.
You guys are the ones that broke it. So step down, step aside, and let a real leader take over and fix it.
You're so confident that Canadians are grounded and they'll vote Liberal? Call an election. I dare you.